Big Bear Point State Forest Campground is located in the northern part of Michigan's Lower Peninsula on Big Bear Lake. There are two campgrounds here that are state forest campgrounds. One is a Big Bear Point State Forest Campground, and the other is Big Bear Lake State Forest Campground. Right now we are at Big Bear Point, and when you first pull into Big Bear Point, there is a large green dumpster and then the registration station where you would pay $20 a night to camp at this location. On the registration station is that orange notice. That orange notice is letting us know that they are going to be doing some work and improvements on the boat launch area here at the campground. And because of that, the boat launch is closed for now. We don't know how long it's going to be closed, but it's completely ripped up and you cannot put a boat in. And apparently this is the only boat access for the lake. While I was visiting, one of the locals came up for the first time this summer to put their pontoon in, and they weren't able to. Anyways, back to the campground. I'm going to slip back here through this very first campsite, and we're going to take a look down here. And you can see that the water kind of wraps around the campground on this side. I'm going to take this little pathway down to the edge of the water, and it's not going to be a situation that you'd want to come down and fish in. The water levels over on this side of the campground for the first few campsites is very shallow, probably not even a foot or a foot and a half deep all the way across. It's very muddy, and as you can see, there's branches and debris all over the place. You'd be lucky to cast a bobber out there and not snag it on something. Now, let's say you do get out here on this side. The lake is supposedly really good for largemouth bass and smallmouth bass fishing. There are also bluegill and rock bass in the lake, catfish, bullhead, and even walleye and northern pike. It's a decent-sized lake, and apparently it's pretty good fishing for all around whatever you're going to be after out here. I'm going to continue through the campsite, and you can see decent picnic tables, and not huge, but okay fire rings. There's a path that leads down to the water from almost all of these campsites, but again, on the first few campsites, it's not worth going down there except if you want to get bit by mosquitoes and be surrounded by bugs. With that said, the campground isn't that buggy once you're up here in the campsites. It's just down in the murky part of the campground that sits along the edge of the water. The campground is fairly clean, and at the time I was here, absolutely nobody was camping. However, I have a feeling it probably stays fairly busy in the summertime with all the fishermen. There are 14 sites to this campground, and as I loop around here, I'm going to give a quick preview of most of them. Most of the campsites are really nice sites, but some of them are quite unlevel. It's probably hard to tell in the video here, but that campsite was pretty uphilly and unlevel. You would have a hard time backing something in like a trailer and leveling it off so it was comfortable. However, if you got up towards the top, there's plenty of space and level ground to throw up a tent or two, and then you can just park on that hill. Site number 7 is one of the biggest sites that they have here, and it almost looks more like a boat launch. It's got such a long pad to it. You could back in your trailer, your vehicle, your boat, and still have all kinds of space to kick back here along the lake. As I walk down to the water there, you can see the fire pits in this campground. Again, they're just kind of small. They're definitely not the nice improved cemented ones. But looking down through here, you get a good idea that this side of the campground has much nicer access to the water. The higher up the number of the campsite, the better the access to the water. It's about the only spot that you could actually fish from your campsite and get into the water. I am here on a weekend, that's why this construction equipment is just sitting here not getting used. I'm sure there's several frustrated people out there who can't get their boats in the lake to go fishing or to put them at their cabins. This is actually campsite number 8 that I'm in right now, and number 8 happens to be right by the boat launch, so keep that in mind. You could get a little bit of extra noise as vehicles come and go that might just be here to go fishing or to launch their boat, and you'll definitely get extra noise during the early part of the season from all of this equipment that's ripping out the old boat launch and putting in the new one. I'm going to take a quick walk here around the boat launch area and just give you an idea of the scale of the project. Again, pretty huge equipment sitting here, and they must just be completely putting down a new cement pad and putting in a new dock. There's that orange sign again, letting people know that it's being improved and that they're going to have a new boat ramp in sometime this year. It just doesn't say for sure when. And here's the project and what it looks like out over the water. It's all measured out and ready to go, but it's not open yet. Don't pull your boat up here. You won't be able to put it in unless you can put it in by hand. Kayaks, canoes, small rowboats, things like that would be perfect. Moving on from the boat launch is a small area to park a handful of vehicles that have boat trailers on them. You could maybe fit 6 or 8 vehicles here comfortably. Here we are at site number 10, and again, I'm going to walk up in here and give you an idea of what the rest of these sites look like along the water. 7 and 8 weren't too bad, but once you get to 10 and 11 and moving on up to 14, it's just a mess down here. You might not even be able to get to the edge of the water. It got pretty swampy, and it even smells a little bit like a bog. Turning back, though, I come right up to the restrooms, and we, of course, are going to open them up and check them out. And they actually don't have a smell at all. They're fairly clean and well kept. However, they're probably fairly underused so far for the season since it's very early June, and people aren't here using the campground since you can't put the boat in. Let's take a look in this campsite real quick. And you can see they're all nicely shaded. You got some sun that breaks through the maples here, but for the most part, they're really nice campsites, minus that tiny fire ring. I just can't get over how much they pump into these campgrounds, and then they leave little fire rings like that where you just can't hardly have any kind of a fire. This campsite happens to have some small, really old steps that are built into the edge that are probably supposed to come down to a hiking trail that was here years ago. You can see where an old trail is still worn in here a little bit, but it's not regularly used because, again, as you get up to the water's edge, there's not much you could do from here except maybe push out through a kayak or canoe. Looking in this direction, we're actually looking out across the lake towards the Big Bear Lake State Forest campground, and I'll be heading over that way once I get done with this campground. I've got just a few more campsites to check out, and then I'll be on my way. Cutting through the woods here, there's another little set of steps that lead up to a campsite that I happen to be parked in. And again, no space to do anything down here by the water, except launch a kayak or a canoe. So we're going to head up the steps and take a look at this campsite that I'm backed into here. You can see I'm backed into the site, and there's still a whole bunch of space. Please don't litter. Whether it's Miller time or not, please don't litter. I have to go through and feel obligated to pick all this garbage up when I'm done and put it in the dumpsters, and it takes a lot of my time up, and it takes the time of everybody else. Helpful hint, there is poison ivy here in the campground. Learn what it looks like before you come to any of these campgrounds, because it seems to be a thing in most of the campgrounds that I visit. And there you see my kneecap. It's because this poison ivy is growing as tall as my knee. Overall, I really like this campground. It would definitely be a bonus for most people if that boat launch was up and operational, or at least if there was a dock out that you could fish from. Even with that, it seems like a nice, quiet place to stay, and I would definitely consider staying here myself. I'm going to leave you now with a little bit of drone footage of Big Bear Lake, and I hope you enjoyed this video.